Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news mashup video today, starting with Andy Ruiz Jr. So you can see here on screen a graphic from the PBC. So he has been on Mike Tyson's show Hot Boxing and talking opponents. So saying Luis Ortiz or Dillian Whyte are guys he's looking at. He says there's a lot of different options. There's Luis Ortiz, who's been calling me out, and there's Dillian Whyte from the UK. There's a lot of good opponents. And either of those two fights I would be perfectly happy with. In terms of Ortiz, there's been talk bubbling along for that for the past 18 months or so. Andy Ruiz Jr., after his loss to Anthony Joshua at the end of 2019, said that he wanted a tune-up fight, then he would consider a fight with Luis Ortiz, and he's now had that tune-up in Chris Arreola. He did have a few hairy moments in that one in rounds 2 and rounds 3, did get dropped, but ultimately went on to claim what I thought was a relatively comfortable decision in the end, despite those few moments where it was a little bit tricky for him. In terms of Dillian Whyte, that's another fight I would like to see. Ruiz and Whyte have been going back at it, in the past on social media. There was offers from Matchroom and Team Whyte back in 2020. What was it, £4-5 million, something there or thereabouts. Ultimately, nothing ever came of it. So either one of those I would be happy with. But if I was to hazard a guess, I think it would end up being the in-house option. What I think is probably going to happen is that because you've got Ruiz and Ortiz both highly ranked in some sanctioning bodies, the WBC and also the WBA. So there is the potential that in one of those sanctioning bodies, they could actually go, hey, we're going to order this as a final eliminator for the champion's belt. Could happen. So I expect that is the more likely of the two. But either fight, if they happen, very good for the heavyweight division and for fans. So moving on, so you have Deontay Wilder telling Sky Sports, I'll KO Anthony Joshua in devastating fashion. And the caption here, Deontay Wilder is feeling confident from DAZN. And it is one of these sorts of situations, and there is a history of this, Deontay Wilder talking about other fighters once he's got a fight signed. But it is hard for him not to answer questions when he's asked about other fighters. So there's that sort of catch-22 sort of situation. But at this sort of point in time, I'm not expecting Deontay Wilder to ever face Anthony Joshua. I think the talk of that is probably, for this purposes, is to, he's got a fight coming up. It helps, get his name out there a little bit more, headlines from that. So any mention of Deontay Wilder at this point is good for his upcoming fight. And I think this is he probably believes that. I'm sure he does. But at the same time, he also has his fight with Tyson Fury coming up. And many people believe that he is not going to win that one. And if he doesn't win that one against Fury, possible Joshua and Wilder fight probably extinguished for good. But even if he does win it, look, we've been there before. In 2018, there was the opportunity for Undisputed. Never happened. So I'm just at this point expecting that some of these biggest fights, this could end up being one of those fights in this generation. Doesn't happen. At this point, I think it's probably likely that it doesn't. So at this point, just all talk. But of those statements, I'll just get to Deontay Wilder from Boxing Scene being quoted here. With no excuses, no mandatories, nothing in the way. As I see, they're already making excuses. They already got a mandatory planned ahead. No one really wants to fight someone like me, and I don't blame them. Well, Joshua, as the champion of 3 belts, has always got a treadmill of mandatories. So you can't just sort of point to that and go, that's a reason that the fight won't happen. Because as we've seen, the sanctioning bodies have been trying to bend over backwards in more recent times to allow an undisputed fight to happen. But and there was some leeway in 2018 for that to happen as well. The WBA waited a number of months for negotiations to sort of play out before ending up saying, look, it's enough time. Alexander Pavek in that fight is called for Joshua. So, yeah, make of it what you will. Obviously, Deontay Wilder's got his views on the world, but at this point, is it going to happen? I mean, I've kind of lost interest to some extent. But another heavyweight that's also calling out Joshua is Joyce. He says, I look forward to the opportunity to punch him up. And Joyce and Joshua have sparred a number of rounds together in the past. Joyce, of course, he was also asked about Joshua after his fight with Carlos Takam was announced. So this was a quote back from the press release event to reporters, etc. So, there is that situation. People might be using Joshua's name, but they're also being asked about him in the same breath. So as they say, it's a catch-22 for the fighter because they have to address the question. But sometimes you could sort of say, rather not talk about anyone, not name my opponent who is next. In this case, Carlos Takam. But Joyce and Joshua, that could be an interesting fight with Joyce being, the juggernaut, as it were, coming forward with volume. But we've seen him with a few more wrinkles in his game of late, using movement, trying to use his length. And he is going to be probably a hard man to stop in the heavyweight division. Not a lot of guys are lining up to fight him at the moment. But Carlos Takam, that's his next test. So let's see how he gets through that. And then talk of title shots. I mean, maybe a little premature because they have been saying that his eventual shot at a title, Joyce, is coming. But what's that based on? I'm not quite so sure because he's not guaranteed anything at this point. Meanwhile, someone who's been working with Anthony Joshua is the Irish heavyweight Thomas Carty, and actually G-Man Boxing had put me on to him, and he's actually been working up at Sheffield at the Team GB facility with Joshua. He is a southpaw, so he's giving Joshua some good work. And actually, Senad Gashi, who's just fought Hussein Muhammad, he will also be coming over to the UK to work with Anthony Joshua. That was confirmed on the broadcast of the Gashi and Hussein fight. And someone who was sparring Anthony Joshua in 2020 is Hosea Stewart. So he is actually turning over. So he was a member of Team GB, hence him being at the Sheffield facility, giving Joshua work at different points. So he has announced he's signed with Wasserman Boxing. So he says, very pleased to announce I've signed a professional contract at Wasserman Boxing under the guidance of world-renowned boxing promoters at Sauerland Brothers. Before I ever put a pair of gloves on, reaching the pinnacle of the sport has been a dream of mine. Now with a great team behind me, we're one step closer to making that reality. And then some shout outs to some different people. So yeah, this will be interesting because there's a number of guys who either didn't make the Olympics, and this is in all sorts of different countries now. They're assessing their options of what they're going to do, turning over, that sort of stuff. And Hosea Stewart is a guy that I've had my eye on for about a year and a half or so, and he does look like he's going to be a talent. Hard to say if he can go all the way or anything like that, too early to tell, but getting the Sauerlands behind him and Wasserman Boxing, it's a good start. So sort of put him on a good footing, and I'm sure he will be able to access through that relationship some good sparring to come. Anyway, what do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.